Welcome back to another episode of the StartWell podcast. This time around, I'm joined in studio with Jacqueline Vong, who I've known for many, many years, and we're reconnecting today to talk all things content licensing, games, merchandising, children's entertainment. We'll see where this conversation goes. There's a lot to talk about. But with that, I will welcome Jack.
I hate Jackie.
To all the Jackies out there,
enjoy your name. It's just not me.
You keep rocking your name.
Hi, Q.
Hi. It is so nice to have you here and to see your face after so long, after many years, as we've each fallen into family life, perhaps.
Yes. It's been a while, and I'm so happy to be back, and I feel like I'm back, during COVID in a room with people and a gorgeous place at StartWell. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This place has been a lot of work, but it's work that enables other people's work, and that's fulfilling to me. So I love it.
Well, congratulations on all of that.
Thank you. Lots to talk about. For starters, catch our audience up on what Playology Incorporated is.
Okay, so for the last 5 years, folks, I have run a strategic consultancy in the youth, entertainment, and kids space, basically merging the intersection of licensing, merchandise licensing, and content marketing together. So what does that mean? Basically, we know that we're consuming content in different ways, and it's ever-changing. And so we have set up ourselves to be thought leaders there and create your go-to market strategy from content initiation to development to creation into the merchandise licensing piece where you make actual toys and publishing and games and help you broker that huge gap and monetize it.
Okay, so let's talk about starting the foundation story as an entrepreneur of launching Playology Inc.
Wow.
What was if there was a context that you could paint for us of founding your own company? Because I know that you work with some great, toy companies, people in this space doing all sorts of things. And you can call those experiences out and then just tell me a little bit about how you went on your own kind of thing.
So I had the pleasure of starting my career with some of the greats, Spin Master, Chorus Entertainment, Nelvana, and Mattel, where I managed Barbie, which, as a female growing up as a child, Barbie was the mecca of where you are. And in the toy industry, Mattel being the number one toy company, right, Barbie was the place I wanted to be. So when I landed the job, I thought, wow, that's amazing, but where do I go next? So I had the opportunity after Mattel to actually go to China and live out my dream of managing the territory of the mainland and creating experiences for kids there.
And when was that? What year was that?
It was 2011. So okay. I left Toronto to go to Hong Kong and manage China from China, but living in Hong Kong, so commuting an hour a day. And bringing in Western brands like Transformers, Fisher-Price, The Minions, and Peppa Pig. So I helped with the conversation and the storytelling of Peppa Pig to making it the number one Western preschool brand there now.
That is massive.
It was amazing. But, personally, I ended up pregnant. And I decided that I wanted to come back to Canada and not have a baby in China. So I unraveled all that progress that I had made in China, which was the best experience, but the hardest of my life, right, and came back here without thinking of a job, just thinking about getting back on OHIP. I was 5 months.
OHIP, for our listeners, is our health program here in Ontario. And for non-Canadians listening, watching this, it's one of the great benefits of being a Canadian is that, we have these social programs that we rely on. And as Canadians abroad, it's a massive thing to always think of coming home when you need home, right?
That's correct. So in China, they told me it was going to be double figures in the $20,000 range to have a baby. And I thought, oh, hip, I'm Canadian. I should repatriate. So I did. I came back here. I was 8 months pregnant and I didn't think about what I was doing about work. But right, I felt very lucky because I've had these great experiences and an Australian preschool band that I knew in the past called the Wiggles came flying to Canada, and they took me out to Toroni, which is an Italian restaurant.
My favorite.
In downtown Toronto.
One of our neighborhood greats.
Exactly. I was 8 months pregnant, and I remember thinking, they just want to catch up with me. That's so nice. They want to take out a pregnant, gonna be mom.
Yeah.
And they ended up offering me a job on the spot. They wanted me to manage North America for them in their licensing program. They had seen my work with Peppa and some of my work previous to that, and they thought, she can handle it with a newborn. So I started a month later, and that's how my consultancy was born.
Paint the picture for myself and for our audience of who don't have kids, of who the Wiggles are and what their impact, to what age set of kids around the world are.
So the Wiggles are what we consider the Fab Four for under four from down under. So
Yeah.
they are 4 live action characters. There's 1 female Wiggle and 3 male Wiggles. They're all in different colors, skivvies they call them. Primary colors. They look like Star Trek suits.
Yeah,
and
they do. And they shine. They're shimmery.
They sing and dance, and they go through every early childhood development milestone. So they're perfect for the age categories of 0 to 3.5, really taking you through movement, early education, dance, early language, counting colors, and toot toot chugga chugga big red car.
I've heard that. I've heard that somewhere.
So have I.
I love the Wiggles. And you know what? My favorite thing about the Wiggles is that tiny piano. I love the little piano.
Yes, and
It's so cute.
Our purple Wiggle plays it so lovely. So they incorporate real instruments. They're bagpipes, banjos, piano, fiddles, all you can think of. And then there's different sorts of genres of dance, from Irish dancing to tap to, of course, ballet.
Oh, yes. The ballet, which my dear Ava loves so much. So that is an exciting beginning to going out on your own, knowing that you're working with a brand that, you will have a relationship with as a mother, in a sense.
That's right. They actually sought me out because they knew that I was going to go through all these milestones with my daughter.
That's interesting.
As well as they knew that I knew who they were as a brand, because when I worked at Spin Master about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Spin Master was their master licensee, and we had seen them through the greatest times of their lifespan. So they're a 30-year-old brand. And
I had no idea. What? The Wiggles have been around for 30 years?
They celebrated the 30 year in 2021, so this year.
Wow.
And
so there are adults who have grown up with the Wiggles today, walking this earth.
It's a multi-generational play. So there are grandmothers, mothers, and now new kids living the generation of the Wiggles. And they've left their classic songs and also developed new songs to really embrace the new sounds and diversity of where we're moving in society.
That's amazingly exciting as a client to work with. Back catalog, new works, cross-platform, global relevance, everything.
It's legacy building, and they're one of the only unicorns, I would say, that still sell CDs and get gold records. To this day, they're still awarded gold records.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
What, I'm sure that was an all-engrossing engagement when you got started, that one client.
I started with my daughter 6 weeks after she was born. I was on the road with her. And not only did I end up working with the Wiggles, but I started also consulting for a toy company and building a brand called Poonicorns, which are poo emoji unicorns.
Yay!
And we created YouTube content, we created toys, and I was tasked to also create pajamas, which were onesies with a poo flap.
That's awesome.
And we had T-shirts that said "poop, there it is," and
I love it.
All kinds of things. So
I love it.
We had a good run with Poonicorns as well.
So people love them. Kids love Poonicorns.
People seem to love poo, and
Yeah.
people seem to love unicorns. So why not mash them
Put
up?
them together. Honestly, my wife is not happy when Ava and I make fun of poo and throw the poo emoji stuffy around the house.
Exactly. I mean, poo is magical for kids. It really is.
It should be magical for you adults in the audience as well. Grow up, realize you're just big kids. That's interesting. So you worked on a kind of a new property with that.
That's right. It was an emerging property, and we were looking for a way to amplify the toy company's strategy. So we created YouTube content, which is why when Playology really started to pivot, I thought content and licensing really go hand in hand, because once you make the merchandise, you need to amplify it with a brand, or once you make a brand, you need to amplify it and monetize it further with a grow category like any sort of merchandising.
I'm sure, the industry has probably become, because now we're talking on global levels. So, of course, everything is so massive and there's so many people. So making generalizations is going to be difficult. But I would say that traditional industries are probably, or traditional large multinational conglomerates involved in this space are most likely going to have, different divisions of their business or consultants working on the same stuff that you, a small micro team, might work on for a brand. They'll have 100 people on. What are the comparative advantages or disadvantages you see of kind of like going it your own versus, I don't know, doing it that old school way?
Very easy. I always say that if you're looking for a cruise ship, please go to one of the big names. They have the resources, the infrastructure, the red tape, the legalities. Everything needs to be dotted perfectly and go through the process. I would consider myself more of a speedboat, where I'm always zipping and zapping and pivoting when needed, and I'm very flexible to ensure that we work in a very quick turnaround when we need to, but we also get to the same place as the bigger company when we need to. So I do consider myself a little bit more adaptable and able to pivot a lot faster and make decisions on behalf of my clients much easier.
I think that dynamicism that you bring to a hands-on approach with all of your clients, because you were telling me earlier that your roster is just like, it's big but small. You're like between 10 and 20 people. Customers, I should say.
Customers, yeah. That's right. It is between startup companies to big to mid-size toy companies, where I'm managing, different fragments of the business, whether it's their licensing program to their content development to franchise management and also marketing and digital marketing. And I would say also what sets me apart from, agencies out there or consultancies out there is my East meets West mentality and sensibilities. My experience on the ground in China really solidified some of the credibility I have to bring to sourcing, manufacturing, also, producing my own products and being able to sell to retail, understanding the retail dynamics, understanding the e-commerce trends from Asia into North America, and then seeing globally what's happening in the world and what's trending over in Asia versus what's trending here. Korea is huge right now in terms of what we're watching and consuming, and music we're listening to. So, I mean,
that note is about Korea going global itself.
Korea has been really trending up, and I would always say back when I was even in Asia, that Korea was really taking its place as the leader in trend setting versus Japan.
Yes.
Japan was always a place where
80s,
you would
90s,
go.
Japan was like mystical and decades ahead of everybody else.
That's right. And now I would go to Korea and really do the trend hunting and sourcing there.
Wow. It's interesting. This is stuff that, of course, locally, especially here in Canada, in this little, big swath of land with a little population floating in the middle of nowhere, where I think, we have this dynamic population that has living links to the rest of the world. And it's something that I always talk to startups, tech-based companies, SaaS companies particularly, about how to leverage our local population to market globally. But when it comes to physical product, when it comes to kind of like this on-the-boots retail experience in foreign markets, it's difficult for Canadians, I would think, to be able to negotiate these multinational opportunities in this space. If I'm talking particularly about merchandising,
I would agree. I'll give you a perspective. I used to manage mainland China, so my target audience to kids was 800 million households, 400 million kids. I'll say that again. 400 million kids. When I would go to Shanghai, the population was about 30 million people at that point in time, probably in 2017, maybe more now. I would speak at a conference in Shanghai and I would say, "Good morning, city of Shanghai. You guys are the population of the entire country that I'm from, Canada. I'm speaking to you just in a city, Shanghai." So the perspective is different. It's not that we're smaller in Canada. I think we're just we just get forgotten sometimes as America's hat or the gift with purchase with America,
Right.
and or because of our smaller population, we just don't have enough of the buying clout or the minimum order quantities that we need. So we have to get more creative in manufacturing and sourcing and also playing in retail creatively. And I've been able to do that with clients through different collaborations and partnerships, but thinking about different ways to manufacture as well and different ways to sell.
Mm-hmm. Any anecdotes from those experiences?
I think what's been really trending is not being held hostage always to selling to the brick and mortar retailers who have set ways in terms of timing. For instance, we're sitting here in October and I'm selling for 2022 fall right now.
And in this dynamic marketplace, or I should say economic context, not marketplace, you can't do that, it feels like. I mean, with the pandemic, with buying trends changing, with seasonality and the seasonal marketing that's normally put into the retail experience not being there because people are at home, etc. Yeah, it seems a little backwards.
I think right now I've been looking at ways to cut out that timeline and see if we can go direct to consumer. And so the direct to consumer play has been a lot more prevalent day in, day out. I'm not saying it's easier. I'm not saying it's replacing anything. I'm just saying we're looking at ways to help commercialize in the short term for clients that could use that extra boost in amplification for their merchandise.
So Asia as a whole, so much diversity. You're talking about large populations, like you just mentioned. You're talking about very like the diversity in cultural contexts across the continent is mind-boggling for Canadians that see diversity on this micro level. As a Canadian working in Asia, how has the experience been in familiarizing yourself with nuances of all these marketplaces?
That's a really good question. First of all, I'm Canadian, so I always led with being Canadian first, being from Canada. But when I went over there, I felt it was really important to become localized because it is like night and day. We don't even wake up to things that would be problems in Canada that are problems in China. So one of the key things that I really learned is really to learn the local preferences because they're all different. China's a very big territory. North, south, east, and west have different tastes and preferences. There's different dialects, but the main dialect is Mandarin. You would learn that you don't lift and land a strategy from North America into China and expect it to work. I failed early on in my career thinking that I had learned from the best. I did learn from the best, Mattel being the #1 toy company, and lifting and landing what I understood was the best practices from what I knew over there, failed miserably. So that's something.
White Barbie doesn't sell in China.
It does because it's aspirational, but you can't sell it the same way to a consumer. And you have to have a price value proposition and a conversation about that. But toilets are very different. And going back to the poo topic, for Fisher Price, I sold potty seat covers in North America very well. So I said to China, my company in China, why not sell potty seat covers? There's white space here. Well, I didn't do enough research about potties in China because they're actually holes in the ground.
Oh, in that sense, yeah, the squat toilets.
The squat toilets, really. Yeah. So they would not need potty covers
Yeah.
because they're literal hole in the ground. So we created and manufactured a bunch of these.
Oh,
and
no. And it was like upper middle class,
It was-
maybe purchase
It was
at all.
also an education point because whenever the Chinese would see the mass market Chinese people, I'm not talking about the high end elite people who have culturally traveled and have access to technology and seen what Western media does or Western world does, they would use the toilet seats and there would be footprints on toilet seats. And I wouldn't understand that until I started talking to my localized staff.
Right.
And they understood it as that's a way to protect their feet when they squat.
I love it.
So there's so many
Oh my
cultural
goodness.
nuances that I can go through, but those are just some examples
Right.
of
Wow.
culture
So you
that
launched
shattered me.
You launched this. These are these things that we use at home, right? Or we're
Yeah.
getting away from now with Ava being 3.5. But that small toilet seat that you put on top of a normal
Correct,
toilet,
for kids.
and then they take their little steppy thing and they step up, or
so
you
they
help
won't
them.
fall through.
Yeah, and they
the
feel
toilet.
safe on that. But on the ground, they're just standing on them.
Or there's no place for you to actually put it. Would just fall in the hole.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. That's hilarious.
I have so many stories like that.
Give me one more.
I'll use one from later days where I represented the Minions.
Okay.
The Minions, huge franchise in
DreamWorks, like, do they own the Minions? Is it its own thing?
It's Universal.
Okay.
And it's a huge entity. We know it in North America. In China, it had never launched. So there were 3 Minion movies already had launched, and we were launching the 4th Minions movie. It was the first time it had ever gone to China. And one thing Universal did not check was the trademark protection.
Ooh.
So they had signed up 50 licensees, me included. Our company was one of the master toy partners. We were going to be one of the first on the ground to roll out in combination with the movie. We were all called to Beijing, capital of China, for this amazing meeting, what we thought was an amazing meeting with Universal to, celebrate our partnership. Instead, they used the meeting to inform us that thank you so much for getting involved with this franchise in China. We are changing the name of Minions to Little Yellow People. And I, in the audience, Canadian minded, thought to myself, oh,
and nobody was
my
laughing in this meeting.
goodness.
No one.
I started laughing.
Yeah, because it's a joke, right? Surely it's got to be a joke. Little yellow people?
For China, for the Chinese market. So, for
That's not racist. It's just objectively descriptive.
Right. And, all my life, I know Asian people might have been called yellow people. And so I thought, oh my gosh, yeah. The second thing, Minions have glasses and lots of Asian people have glasses. Minions work on an assembly line. The Chinese are known as the world's factory. The Minions follow an evil leader. I thought there would be a comparison drawn to Chairman Xi, which is China's chairman. And, he's the chief in command there. So I didn't think it was a great idea. Nevertheless, I tried to call California from China, and they were like, listen, you guys are running your own ship. It is independent. We're part of the same team, but it is an independent thing. They've sacrificed a lot of money into rebranding it. And what do you think happened? Well, I'll tell you. The folks that didn't pay into the licensing and become the official merchandise and could use Minions because they weren't asking for approval were the ones who won. The ones who didn't win were the official merchandise of Little Yellow People, because those who knew the Minions franchise thought, why do the Little Yellow People look like counterfeits?
So it flipped the script. And so people kind of like selling quote unquote Minions locally were making money
on the streets. So you can see a lot of the street vendors, a lot of the bargains, a lot of anything that was an official merchandise that were in stores were the ones that were selling like hotcakes.
And then did they drop the Little Yellow People subsequently as the name of the toy?
They sunk $100 million into rebranding it. So they were just going to keep going.
Wow. That's a lot of money in a rebrand. The experiences that you've had as a Canadian in Asia have probably kind of changed the way you want to do business and who you want to do business with. Tell me a little bit about how what you do is forever changed by the experiences of being based there and having expertise in that region.
So one of the divisions I have in my organization is the sourcing and manufacturing. And I have seen firsthand how manufacturing lines and factory workers work in China. And I know that 80% of the world's production, especially in toy manufacturing, which is something I know very well, go through China. But with supply chain being the way it is, with the issues on labor and shortages of container ships and cargo and drivers, I have also been one of the more outspoken people to look for alternatives beyond China, because it feels like we have all our eggs in the global basket in China for production.
And costs are going up in China, even pre-pandemic, right? And like I know we have friends, they're actually a partner of StartWell for our, we're going to have a housewares and clothing line come out next year.
And you're not asking me as your merchandise expert?
I know. We will have subsequent conversations about this. But there are some Canadians that are out there. Their brand is called Juma, and that's also their last name. And we've partnered up to do some really interesting clothes that fit this kind of agile work life that we see our customers on campus pursuing. So it's like a custom designed clothing line for the new way of working. That kind of like comfortable, but you look smart vibe. Yeah. And globally conscious,
Of course.
Yeah. And so, but what was interesting is they're telling me about, how the rising costs in not only the raw materials, cotton and so on, have been going up, textiles have been going up, but then labor costs. And they've come up with really innovative manufacturing techniques. And all of their textiles now are made out of recycled PET, because it's actually not just because it's cheaper, it's also great for the environment. Well, it's still plastic, but it's reusing something. But yeah, so it's kind of like this, multi-bottom layer.
But interestingly enough, right now, not only is cost going up in raw materials and laborers, but energy, right? And we know there have been rolling blackouts in China to really save and conserve the energy production for heat, because it is going into some of China goes into winter, and we are going into the holiday season, which is the time that we really use a lot of coal for production. So it has been a big issue. So pandemic, labor shortage and labor cost crisis, energy crisis, the container ports, lack of drivers on our side in North America to take the merchandise off and to pack it, and the Suez Canal. All of these have led to this enormous disaster of not getting our toys in time for Christmas.
What's funny is, like, in all the things you just listed, there was all these great, poignant, complex issues, and then the Suez Canal is like as important as a stumbling block, but such a hilarious situation. Am I right in remembering that there was basically a boat that got stuck in the mud and then blocked up all the other boats, and then the owners of the boat didn't want to figure it out because they were like, it's not worth it on paper to us to figure this out. You keep the boat, keep the merchandise, insurance will probably help us out. And then the operators of the canal were like left holding the poop.
It is one of the narrowest canals in all of the world, but also one of the most commercial, where everybody goes through. And so if you can imagine like a plug in a hole, and not being able to remove it for days,
right? And
the backup that it causes, because everything's on a schedule. So yeah, that's what happened. And then there's been an uptick in pirates. I can get into pirates.
Yeah, can we go there for a few minutes? Just tell me about pirates.
People are losing merchandise because they're being seized by literal pirates.
Are we talking just like Somalis, or it's other people getting in the game?
I wouldn't just generalize and say it's the Somalis, but I'd say pirates. They are out there. There are warehouse pirates also, trying to hold your merchandise hostage.
Wow.
So there's a lot of uptake about creative thievery, I feel.
Yeah, well, I know Vice has been reporting on some of this stuff. I've been picking up on some of these stories. They're talking it's a mixture of like piracy and counterfeiting, and how they're kind of like interrelated, it seems like. And it could be because, counterfeiters know what the value of the original product is, and if it goes up to such a point, they're gonna try and even restrict or control that price to drive up demand for their pirated version.
1,000%.
Yeah.
I worked in China, and not only did we manufacture legitimate product, but there's a whole marketplace, to ensure that factories are making counterfeit products. And while I was on the counterfeit protection side because I was representing brands, it's a big business. And to get local government enforcement and the government to buy into protection, you have to spend a lot of money because their whole business of ensuring that people work in factories.
Right. They don't care.
There are so many factors that rely on this manufacturing of counterfeits.
Of course, yeah. It's more important to the society, let's say,
That's
to
right.
have employment without thinking of what the employment necessarily is involved with. Of course, globally, this has implications in all sorts of ways and opens the door to human rights issues. And I personally have seen this, of course, as someone who's lived in Africa, and we see some of the work that children do, unfortunately, and other people who are, at gunpoint in mines in Central Africa so we can have iPhones or whatever the issue is. This
Right.
does have its tentacles. But we digressed because it was fun. It was fun, but I want to go back to that idea of differentiated sourcing across Asia and the idea of, okay, there are some issues in China to do with, energy and so on.
So recently, during COVID, a lot of people, even pre-COVID, a lot of manufacturers were looking for ways to not rely heavily on Asia. And so one of the areas that were investigated was Southeast Asia. So Vietnam, all the
Malaysia.
Philippines, Malaysia.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say about that is China has had a lot of time to perfect their manufacturing process, and Vietnam Southeast Asia as a territory is a good region to potentially create components. But essentially, it always goes back and gets consolidated in China. So you end up relying on China to manufacture it, package it, and send it back to America because the process isn't wholly done in Vietnam or Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
The other territory that has been emerging is India.
Mm-hmm.
India is the one place that I think has a population base that can rival China's.
Right.
It is one of the largest populations in the world. And one of the advantages of India is it's predominantly English speaking in the business world.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
it is a little bit easier to communicate. And we have seen in the world that lots of larger companies have started to look towards India and invest in India. I'll have to say, quality wise, we're not 100% there yet.
Across the board for all, because there's certain things that are good coming out of India, but there's certain things that seem difficult.
Well, I think they're about 20 years behind China because that hasn't ever been an initiative for the government to really invest in their manufacturing sector.
Right.
The government, Modi right now, is looking at incentives and really building up the textile industry, the tech industry.
And of course, he's
plastics.
been biased towards his own province, and there's that whole Gujarat First question.
That's
and
right.
Then the politics around the BJP and whether they're like racist and promoting Hindu, whatever. Look, I did my degree at McGill. We went to McGill together. My degree was in Hinduism and Buddhism. And there is no such thing as Hinduism, historically, right? It's kind of like colonial construct. And it's so hilarious to me that you have this political party that's extremely racist and in power, leading a nation of, 1 billion plus people, and having a preference for a particular supposed religious identity that, if you scale it back 100 years, doesn't exist. That one identity is made up of thousands of regional identities. And it's not at odds with Islam or anything else. It's just, political crap. But the point of the matter is massive population, massive opportunity, and it's tough to concert the whole nation's efficacy to compete globally.
But more and more, I find that there are companies very interested in having that conversation with India, partnering with India. And ironically, China has taken notice and they have started doing joint venture partnerships because they realize their challenges, and India has less challenges in the labor force sense. They have a younger labor force. I think China is a little older and aging population, whereas entering the Indian labor force, it's about it's an early 20s play. So there's a lot of life in India to develop, but yes, the technology, the infrastructure, the investment in manufacturing is not there yet.
Mm-hmm. It is exciting though, for any large plays, considering, I suppose considering medium terms being in decades, because
I'd say 20 years out, but it has to start somewhere. And right now, I feel like there's a lot of investment going and a lot of education being done.
in the last couple decades, what's been interesting from my chair is seeing China being able to provide services and goods to the world with relative agility. There's this kind of like China can figure it out mentality in North America, definitely. And we've seen it in the startup sector where people consider any type of hardware manufacturing as being able to be made cheap and quick. And they just take all that, for assumptions that they'll find someone to do it in China. That is difficult. It's always, from the anecdotes I've heard, more difficult than it sounds anywhere to start, creating a new product, especially if the means of production requires unique tooling, right? So talking about chips and computers and all that kind of stuff, your factories would have to be built to spec to build that particular thing sometimes.
And even figurines. So creating an action hero, Marvel, anything like that, every part that's articulated or non-articulated needs to be molded and tooled and designed in a way that's manufactured efficiently for mass production. I can go into this in more technical expertise if you want, but I know that's for another podcast.
Sure. No, but it's an apt point to even say that, which is that, from the consumer standpoint, something that seems simple, no matter what the product is, right, has a lot of effort behind it. And what's interesting, of course, is in talking about how products can be not only rapidly, prototyped and developed and then copied wherever it is.
Copied in a heartbeat in China, I feel like. That's why I always recommend to anybody, if they're entering into that part of the world, to ensure that they have their trademark protection, their copyrights, everything really legalized. And even if you have your legal documents, there's no guarantee right there.
Okay, so something that's, of course, always top of mind for StartWell members, partners, and our audience in general is the kind of like topic, the ever-flexing topic of the future of work and how, right now anyway, how the pandemic has changed some of that embrace of remote work. And I'd like to hear your take on your how you do your work,
Sure.
especially working globally. And how, it's changed in the last little while and how you might perceive it changing in the future.
It's interesting. I have international clients from Australia, China, India, and then I have local clients in North America. And I used to be on the road 8 months of the year. And during the pandemic, I did everything virtually. So has there been progress? I would say investment-wise, I saved over an enormous amount on travel,
right,
on overhead, for my office space. I feel as though the hybrid model is what we're moving towards and what we as a society are comfortable with. There are people who are very anxious still with the coronavirus. I know there's still the vaccine hesitancy, which again, I don't want to get into, but I'm fully vaxxed and I promote being vaccinated, but there is definitely hesitancy and, an understanding, especially that people are hesitant for different reasons. So I do have empathy and want to hear people out on that. Traveling will probably happen and conferences will happen, but I find that not having an office space and using something like StartWell will be my model from here on in, because I do feel like there's more efficiency in not investing and putting myself on a lease and that overhead, and having a space like this to really satisfy all the needs that I can do, and then not use my home, because my home has been my office, and my home is also the house of 2 children who are very young, and it's a tornado. So I would love to have more productivity during the day with the flow of work at a place that's so zen.
Thank you. Yeah, it is very chill here. I think, it's interesting because I think this thing of being, in the last little while, perhaps, and tell me your experience, but for a lot of people I'm talking to, the, shall we say, the quick embrace of trying to do everything digitally, and not taking time out of your day to travel long distances to get to the office and all these sorts of things, have enabled people to focus on kind of what they want, save some time in their day and all that stuff. But the lingering Achilles heel to the model is sitting at home all day. So being able to choose to work in a context where you need focus when you need it, definitely, we believe is the future. But how does that interrelate with the way you work in terms of being on calls, around the clock, and then also ostensibly needing to have in-person interfaces with people in your markets?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I find that because I'm working from home, I'm unable to plug in, and people assume that I'm always available. So if I were to, let's say, dedicate some hours at a place and, put it out there, I would definitely feel as though I've shut down for the day. And
so that's even if you're doing remote, like you're on the phone or you're on Google Meet or whatever, but having that,
because physically I can
scheduled time.
shut my laptop down
Yeah.
and actually feel like I'm commuting back and forth from work and my work day is done.
That's interesting.
Even though I know I will probably have a night or two that I would have overnight calls with my overseas clients, I would feel like I'm done for the day. Whereas
Right.
I don't ever feel like I'm done for the day at home because my laptop is permanently on my desk and it's on all the time. I have another screen, I have a microphone,
Yeah.
I have my headphones, and it's just there. So whenever in between meal times when I'm feeding my children, I'll run back to my desk.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I have forgotten, to do something, I'll run back to my desk.
Mm-hmm.
This way I can tangibly shut it down.
Yeah. It's so important. It's funny because I, for many reasons, right, for the last few years, have on this, particularly on the StartWell journey, but I used to have a defined office space. It was a room that was dedicated to my office. And that was, before StartWell. And then when I was doing I guess it was at the time when I was running IBM startup program. And if I think back, actually, I didn't have an office at IBM. It was assumed that it was a remote position. So I used to invest in startup ecosystem spaces like this and then drop into a hot seat once in a while, like go to an accelerator for the day, go to the incubator for the day. But I hate that because I love being remote, but I always want to come back to home base.
Mm-hmm.
It might be my, the way my brain's structured from coding for many years. I like locking into a big screen
Mm-hmm.
and putting on the headphones. Shout out to, Above and Beyond. And tuning into kind of like progressive house and trance and the music that drives my focus. But so that's an interesting thing for me. I like coming back to a workstation that I can rely on. But I think back to when I had a room at the house that was my office. I would want to close the door, and that's wrong. I never want to in my house. I'm in the bathroom. I don't close the door.
I don't have the luxury of closing the door either.
Yeah. And so I found very early when I founded StartWell that look, now I've got 20,000 square feet at my fingertips to be able to carve out the ideal spaces to do what I do in. And then that's been baked into the brand where I'm like, okay, we've got a podcast studio to have conversations. I've got my desk, that workstation. No one goes into that office except for me. I've got all these different spaces for different functions. And then, it so happens that we find that everybody else is in the same boat here where people I guess they need to retool their minds on what's available to them and the opportunity to work in different ways. But I do see this being at home, trying to focus as a starting point to be extremely disadvantageous to feeling good about work. And then,
it's also because you're at home, you think you have to put in the laundry, you have to buy groceries, you might have to start dinner. You might have to clean up. There are toys everywhere. For me, at least, there are toys
for
and
all of us
samples
parents.
everywhere. So just can't seem to get organized. And even if I do, my kids will come in and destroy my productivity.
Right. Yeah, and then you don't want to have that mindset of being like, you're in my way or you're not letting me do my thing. You want to be with them and be present when you're with them. It's like
Mostly.
Yeah, mostly.
I love them. Don't get me wrong. They just are rambunctious little crew right now.
Oh yeah, understood, man. I live the life. I want to hear a little bit on the kind of, I guess, what does next year look like for you?
Wow.
Can you answer that?
Well, we're right now in different life cycles of different brands. So I manage the Wiggles and Elf on the Shelf, and we're going into the holiday season. So Elf on the Shelf licensing for Canada will be big. Right after American Thanksgiving, we start the social media program, and it's holidays. So this is a really fun brand to work on, and I have a lot of fun merchandise coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be my holiday starting next year when we start the year over again. I will be working on some new content creation with creators, and that will be very exciting. We're about to revolutionize some white space in the kids' world, and I'm very interested to see how well it does for our launch, which is happening in a couple of weeks.
Quite a detailless, teaser there.
I can't let you know, but once, if I'm back on this podcast, I will be happy to report, hopefully, that we have pioneered some space.
Interesting and exciting.
And it's kids space, and that's a space that I know so well as a mother, but also in the industry for over 20 years. So that's exciting, and that will be, a project that I'll be living and breathing. And then a couple of other amazing projects. So I'm in the crypto metaverse,
Mm-hmm.
and that is such a fascinating space because it's young, it's ever changing, it's so fast paced, and there's so much currency being exchanged. And what I'm doing is I'm pioneering not crypto, but I'm bridging the gap between crypto and what we know in real life and putting them together with a brand that is one of the OG brands, but they've created a whole cast of characters, which they're calling the superhero of cryptocurrency. And I think there's future building right there.
Wow. Okay, so that's definitely another podcast. We've got a couple of reasons. We've got this big teaser looming question of what you're working on to revolutionize white space in this kind of kids entertainment area.
And then I shouldn't fail to mention some of the other clients that I work for are, the coolest pop culture toy companies out there that I'm working on. Nostalgia. I'm working on all things chuggy, if those millennials know what I'm talking about. TikTok initiatives. I'm working on going after licenses in gaming and anime, which are huge spaces. And I'll say Super Impulse is one of my clients, and they've just launched DDR, which is Dance Dance Revolution, miniaturize for fidget and finger play. So
that's crazy.
Blowing your minds.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that's a holiday season play right now.
Excellent. So that's a recommendation of parents to go and pick it up.
For parents, not kids, because I think DDR is really aimed at people who know DDR.
Yeah. I didn't go there. I know what it is, but I maybe because I was a little awkward with my feet.
Well, you can play with it with your
my
hands
fingers.
now. Yeah.
I'm pretty good. I used to have a kalimba.
Yeah.
Yeah. Little finger piano. I was
Yeah.
pretty good with that. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll be good with this
You
and
never
feel
know.
special.
Fidget is huge right now because, everybody is at their desks all the time
Feeling anxious.
and needing to focus.
Right. That's exciting
Mm-hmm.
and timely.
Very.
Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, it was such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Is there a place you want to direct anyone who's interested in learning more about Playology or figuring out how to work with you?
Check me out on socials at Playology INTL or at my website, which seems outdated to call out, but playologyintl.com.
Awesome. It was a pleasure having you on.
Nice to speak to you.